Welcome to the Schmoeville podcast, an after show for all things Schmoes Know, ColliderVideo, and the Schmoedown. My name is Brian Davids, and I'll be your host this week. My co-host Ryan Snelling has taken some much-needed R&R and has retreated to a remote cabin in the woods of Kentucky. And speaking of remote cabins, I have a very special guest for this week, someone who could be described as a remote cabin authority. You know him by a multitude of names. He's the Swiss Army knife of the Schmoelighter universe. Of course, I'm talking about none other than Facty McFacterson, Mr. Mark Yodi Reilly. Mark, say hello to Schmoeville.
Well, hello, Schmoeville. What a great intro, Brian. Thank you.
Mark, before we get to the week that was in Schmoes Know and ColliderVideo programming, I want to first discuss you and your origin story to this point.
Okay.
So, Mark, for those who don't know, you met Kristian in 2000 when you were both working at a CPK. Did you guys hit it off right away because of that mutual desire to be creative?
That's a good question. When we met waiting tables, we were doing the Hollywood thing, which is you go to Hollywood, you go to be in the entertainment business, you have to make ends meet. So what do? You wait tables. That's also where I met Brett, which I think you know that.
I do.
Yeah, me, Brett, Kristian were kind of always hanging out. We connected because we were big Star Wars geeks. That's the first thing I remember is we would always talk about Star Wars. We would always talk about movies. Little did I know it was setting up our life as we know it. I couldn't remember exactly what he was going towards. I knew that he was doing stand-up, and I would go see him a bunch of times. Me, I was more of on the writing side and producing side, so that's where we kind of connected.
Did you guys start making plans creatively from the start? Or did you feel each other out for a bit and become friends first?
It was really just feeling each other out and becoming friends. You know, we would wait tables. We would, that job sucked our will to live a lot of times. So we would go out with friends. I remember a number of times going to even see Brett do stand-up in Santa Monica. We would all go out afterwards. Kristian and I remember him putting together, as Kristian, as you can tell with Kristian and what he does, he likes to make things happen, and he pulls together good people. And we tried. I remember one time going in Beverly Hills, meeting somewhere with a bunch of people, Brett included, me, Kristian, and we were going to do something. I'm trying to remember what it was, but it had to do with writing. It had to do with performing. Maybe it was a sketch crew. Maybe it was a film something. I can't remember what, but it ultimately didn't go anywhere.
But subconsciously, even though this project didn't go anywhere, I think you both realized that you could work together creatively. Mm-hmm. So you guys went your separate ways. I think you made a short film. He went to go work for the WWF. Then you guys reconvened later, right?
We wrapped back around and worked on a He-Man adaptation years later.
So needless to say, the Kristian that we know now is very much like the Kristian you knew then.
Absolutely. He just had an energy about him that I really much admired. I liked that he took chances. Everything was on his sleeve. He wore everything on his heart on his sleeve. He would tell you exactly what he's doing. I was more introverted and writing, and so therefore I would share my stuff with him. Like whenever I finished something, I would always give it to Kristian because of that dynamic that we had, and he would read it and give me his notes. And 9 times out of 10, he loved what I was doing. And when he was at doing an internship at Village Roadshow, that led to him getting a job at Silver Pictures, and he would then pass my stuff around, which then opened a bunch of doors for me. So that was fun.
Some people dream about what they'll do someday, while others actually do everything they can to fulfill their dreams. So it makes sense to me why you guys hit it off so well. Mm-hmm. You didn't just dream of making a movie, you actually made a movie.
Yeah.
Similarly, Kristian was able to fuse all of his interests into Schmoes Know down the road, a melting pot of his love for Howard Stern, wrestling, comedy, etc. So both of you guys went out and did it instead of just talking about what you wanted to do someday. So I think that's why you guys connected so well.
Absolutely. He's very active and goes out and does it. And you could say he does it this is a compliment, loudly. He goes and he's like a bull, and he will go through and get it done. And I'm very precise and take my chances as well, but that's the writer in me. And so you mentioned my movie, Gray Skies. I wrote that. I got investors. I worked with a ton of people and made it happen. Wish it turned out better, but, That's beside the point.
But you still did it, and that's the takeaway.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to keep harping on this point, but a lot of people come to LA from a small town where they're told how special and how talented they are in relation to where they came from. But when they come to LA, they think that treatment will follow them. And I've seen this firsthand. Many people sit around and wait for something to happen while others make things happen. Kristian may have done things a bit louder, as you said, but how you do it doesn't have to be the same as long as you're doing it. Mm-hmm. Some people take the performer route, others take the behind-the-scenes route, but there's this common thread amongst the Schmoes, be it you, Kristian, Ellis, Macuga, JTE, Ken, Finstock, etc., as you all reached that proverbial fork in the road and decided to gamble on yourselves. Many of you moved away from everything you've ever known, so I just want to say how much I respect that quality in you guys.
Oh, thank you.
So moving to 2011, the Schmoes Know podcast is launched by Mark and Kristian. Katee Sackhoff is their first guest, and you appeared shortly thereafter, episode 6, I believe, to talk X-Men movies. Then you returned for episode 19 to promote your film, Gray Skies. If someone told you back then that very show would someday change your life, would you have believed them?
No, absolutely not. God, you've done your homework. I like it. Yeah, I remember the X-Men show. That must have been when they were at Universal City Walk. I can't remember the name of the company. I think it was Toad Hop. And yeah, the promotion of Gray Skies was, I think I was with my ex, and we talked about that. And I just thought they were just doing a podcast and just kind of shooting the shit, having fun. I didn't put much stock into it. It wasn't that I didn't respect them and what they were doing. I loved what they were doing. I was just, at that moment, I had my blinders on. I was trying to do everything possible to get that movie out there. And I thought perhaps this will lead to something, another movie, another writing project, which it ultimately did. But it was funny then because the Schmoes, when they did come along, when I did join the show, it was probably at the most perfect moment for me in my life, both professionally and personally, because I was just coming off of a divorce. And now I had something to do, which I always tell everybody who knows me. I tell people that when you go through a divorce, it's a pretty rough thing to go through. And to have Kristian kind of say, why don't you just show up and talk movies with me? It really kind of helped get me back on track, to get out of my head and out of my way to finally just being back in society.
I have some friends who've been divorced, and a lot of them have gone to therapy, but it sounds like Schmoes Know was your version of therapy.
It was a version of therapy. You know, as you fast forward years down the line, that Schmoes Know crew is now my family. I know them so well. They didn't judge me for it. They had a lightness about it where it's just like, we don't need to talk. Let's move on. And it was fun. I started to notice that there was something happening. There was a magic in the room that I could feel. And I was like, well, this is going to lead to opportunities that I want to be a part of. So I'm loving this.
It's interesting that you said the word family, because someone just told the story about Derek C. in France and how when he was on the way out of his interview down at the studio, he said, you guys are like a family.
That was awesome.
So I like that you said that, but just in case Cobster is listening, your first 2 appearances were before the Toad Hop era. Mm-hmm. You were on episode 6 as well as 19. The Toad Hop era began as of episode 43, so Cobster cannot say that I don't do my research.
Oh, did Cobster call you out or something? I wasn't on the show, but I did see some tweets.
Well, he made a series of generalizations about our research when he was really taking issue with the fact that nobody knew about his secret promotion to producer in Miri's new title of executive producer. I previously called Miri a producer because her Twitter bio uses the term producer. Then he suggested that we're unfair to Cody, which just isn't the case. A previous era of this podcast may have joked at Cody's expense, but the only time he was mentioned during my tenure was Snelling's issue with a Schmoedown intro last week, something I didn't even notice. Clearly, Cobster hasn't listened in a while, because the JTE interview proves how overprepared I am, as well as last week's attempt to correct the gross mispronunciation of Michael Giacchino's last name, which they still did not correct this week. Shame on you, Jedi Council. Again, it's Giacchino, not Giacchino.
There you go. Yeah, Yeah, I had some words with Copster. I thought the same thing a couple times, I'll be honest with you. There were comments made by you guys I listen to your Schmoeville podcast all the time.
We appreciate that. Thank you.
But I'm eating my words because you just proved that you do a ton of research and have your facts straight, at least for me, so I'll appreciate that.
In fairness, there are certain elements that you guys withhold from us, so we have no choice but to speculate in those cases. So you can't really blame us in those situations.
Mm-hmm.
And while I can't speak to the previous era of the show, I know that Snelling does a lot of preparation, but I can guarantee as long as I'm on this show, we'll always be well prepared per the information that is available to us.
Thank you.
So after your first couple appearances, you eventually joined as a regular cast member in 2012. This was phase 3. Did you love it right away? Because I always tell people, once you start podcasting, you'll never be able to stop.
Oh, yeah. When we started at the Toad Hop, when I joined pretty much full time with around the same time as Kenny and Macuga, I was really nervous because I started to notice the fans in Schmoeville. And there were a lot, for me at least. I wasn't well versed in social media at the time. I don't think anybody really was. We kind of hit that sweet spot where social media was really starting to take off as the show was starting to take off. So I was like introduced to this world of like, why are people tweeting at me? Why are people wanting to hear what I have to say? This is fun. Man, we're also getting people in studio that are in this business. It really cemented for me when we did this bit called What's the Pitch? I pitched my Gremlins prequel to Ethan Irwin from Silver, who I had already worked with on the He-Man adaptation. But I was so nervous because I was on a show and I was doing it for an audience. So it was a performance as well as I'm sitting there with somebody I've worked with as a colleague. I took it very seriously, and it wasn't until after the show where I'm like, oh, that was just a lot of fun. I don't need to take it as seriously. But I started to realize this could help me as a writer and a producer. And sure enough, it has. As things started clicking into place with Schmoes, I knew I was on the right track.
Again, to those listening, this was phase 3 at Toad Hop, but deeper into it since they started out as a morning show.
Mm-hmm.
And there were 2 Toad Hop locations. The first one at Universal Studios before moving to the Hollywood studio that most of you will recognize as of Sean Astin's first episode.
Yeah.
But the show really found itself, I think, when it moved to the evenings.
Yeah.
That allowed for more people to come on board, such as Yodi, such as Macuga, Ken, and that introduced the game changer of alcohol. And Katee Sackhoff had just joined as co-host right before the move to the new Toad Hop studio. And to that point, since Katee just returned to the show at the Collider studio for the first time, what is your standout Katee Sackhoff moment from phase 3?
There was an episode that she was on. God, I'm going to butcher all the names, but it was a fun show. I believe Ken created a perfume line with her, and they talked about it. You probably, Brian, your research is spot on today.
Classless whore perfume.
There it is. Classless whore perfume. Exactly.
Quick history lesson for those listening. The episode that I just mentioned with Sean Astin, as well as Jeremy Johns, that was also the first episode at the second Toad Hop studio in Hollywood. Katee told a story about how somebody called her a classless whore on Twitter. The line took on a life of its own. Ken Knapsack eventually made a perfume bottle that looked like Coco Chanel perfume, only it said Katee Sackhoff's classless whore perfume on it.
Exactly. That was so funny. And Katie's willingness to just go with this group of guys just shooting the shit was just hilarious. I also remember Ellis and Katee doing dueling dragon calls.
Yes, the dragon sounds.
I think Katee was doing a Dragon Con, and Ellis was up there doing stand-up, and so he ran into her, so that was funny. I joined pretty much once Tiffany was secured as the new co-host for... I think I was actually there when Katee was handing the reins over to Tiffany.
Episode 81.
Yep, that's, I believe, the most memorable Sackhoff moment for me.
One of my favorites is how Ellis would always give Katee a hard time about forgetting Battlestar DVD since he hadn't seen the show.
Yeah.
And I don't think he's seen it to this day.
I know. It's the best show, one of my favorite shows all time.
I think she put together one of the best woman characters ever put to screen on television.
she doesn't get enough credit. She was really under the radar, especially when we're in this interesting time in Hollywood where we're looking for diversity and strong female characters. And Katee Sackhoff's Starbuck was the template for that. Nobody looks back at Battlestar as being something that this is what, when that was reimagined, Starbuck was a male character and they did it for Katee and they created that female character, that strong female character. It's like Hollywood, look there. Nobody remembers Battlestar Galactica and it bums me out because it's so good, A, and B, that Katee did blaze that trail, which is why Schmoeville, of course, wanted her as Captain Marvel.
It's unprecedented for someone in her position, fresh out of Battlestar and on the shortlist for every female action hero role, to then join an online radio show, if you will, as co-host. We got to hear firsthand what her life was like at a time when she's constantly in the mix for roles like Captain Marvel, which she might have gotten had the Hateful Eight gone as expected. But that part of Phase 3 took the show to a whole new level. It was such an advantage, both short-term and long-term.
Yeah, Phase 3 is arguably one of my favorites, too.
Now, talk to me about the website. You eventually were the editor-in-chief of the Schmoes Know website.
Yeah.
But you were contributing to it back in 2009. So,
yeah.
Would you say that this experience was critical to what you're doing now at Collider?
Oh, yeah. It laid the groundwork for everything I've done since. And yeah, I remember Kristian, he had his website. I would write for it. It was even while I was married. It was while I was doing my movie. It was all those kind of things. And I thought it was fun. It kept me on my game. And then when we finally got over to Toad Hop and I noticed the fans and how much we were being, followed and watched and or listened. And I remember having a conversation with Ken Knapsack and Kristian and we need to create a website. If we do breaking news, we'll have some visitors. I'll never forget having a meeting with Mark, Kristian, Ken, and Luis Mendoza, who ended up being our website creator and a dear friend as well. And we all put our thoughts down on paper and we launched it. It was kind of like one of those things, too, where Ken and Macuga were fighting over her and tweeting who should be producer of the show, and he ended up getting it.
Oh, that's right.
Very similar. He was like, oh, maybe I'll do some website work, and then all of a sudden I end up doing it, and I ended up running that thing for a few years. So, I really set out to make schmoesknow.com something special, and I spent a year working on it for free to make that happen. I invested in myself. And you can also say I invested in Schmoes Know as a brand because I believed in it, and we did, and we launched it, and it led to so many opportunities because I took a site that had maybe 3,000 hits to 300,000 to 400,000 to a million hits. And that was something that was very special. And yeah, it led to, I worked at Geek Nation for a time running their site, and then when the opportunity came at Collider was looking for, you said it at your opening, and even Complex, when I interviewed with them, they said they were looking for a Swiss Army knife. They wanted somebody who could produce. They wanted somebody who could write. They wanted somebody who could be in the ColliderVideos studios that could then work with Collider.com. And I had all that. They looked at my movie resume. They looked at the fact that I worked on television shows before. They looked at the fact that I ran Schmoes and Geek Nation, and they went, well, this is a no-brainer, and I was hired pretty immediately, which I love.
We'll get into those in detail in a minute, but you brought up something that I really respect because I don't think a lot of people realize that you did work on the Schmoes Know website for free for quite a while.
Yeah.
And it really took everybody buying in to what this brand, what this company, what this business could be for it to get to the point to where it is now, where it was able to merge with a company like Complex as well as Collider. And so what you did led to all of the events that have since unfolded. So I really want to commend you for that.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, there were some dark days in there where I thought it was never going to happen, where I was never going to make a living. I depleted some of my savings, but it was worth it in my mind. Because I also look at what Kristian and Mark were doing at the time, and Ken as well, and Macuga. Mark and Kristian had to start doing this for free as well. They weren't just making a ton of money over on YouTube or even over at Toad Hop. So I looked at them as they were doing it as well in their own way. Ken as well, producing the show for free for a long time. We were all doing it with the thought that if we keep doing it, we hold on, something will happen. And you said it. Look what happened. And I think we all landed in the most perfect places that I look back now, I wouldn't have changed a thing.
Yeah, the show definitely had some trying times. Toad Hop abruptly stopped producing shows, so Phase 3 came to an end. Phase 4 was a bit of a transitionary period for everybody, but then Phase 5 rolled around. The show was then hosted by AfterBuzz. The site really started running at full steam, a lot of contributors. You guys also started a bunch of other shows for AfterBuzz, such as Meet the Movie Press.
Yeah.
I've always wondered, was this part of the agreement with AfterBuzz that you guys would create other content for their network in exchange for studio time for Schmoes?
I think that's a part of it. I'm not too aware of the inner workings of the deal. I know that when we did the transition, as you said, Phase 4, to no fault of their own, we just didn't have the equipment or a place to do the show well. We brought it over to Drama 3-4, David Fickus and Bryce Beckham, two of my USC buddies that I've worked with for years. I was working with them as a producer at the time on some projects. They graciously let us in to record the show, to keep it going, to try to keep the momentum going. Because as you said, the Toad Hop abruptly closing, yeah, that sucked. We were so bummed because it was such a great place. It had a great energy. It was the closest thing. Knapsack has said it a number of times, how close it was to radio, and that's where he got his start. But to have those little cameras above the monitors that gave you a little peek inside the studio so you could see us was so cool. So yeah, then with AfterBuzz, we got our show back up, and Kristian basically told me, hey, here's an idea for a show. Meet the Movie Press. It makes sense. You were running schmoesknow.com. And when he asked Jeff Snyder, I just thought that was brilliant. I had only known Snyder from his Twitter rants. So I was a little, and as you know, obviously he worked for The Wrap. So I was a little nervous to meet him. We went to Maria Menounos and Kevin Undergar's party over summer where me and my girlfriend Julie and Jeff Snyder, we all hung out and with the Schmoes, obviously, and just had a great time. I'm like, oh, we're going to kill this. Because Snyder and I then immediately hit it off. And I actually really missed doing the show with him because I thought we had a great dynamic.
I miss watching it.
Yeah, that was unfortunate, but I knew that it was going to come to this. Collider, they got an exclusive deal on me. I had to bow out of Meet the Movie Press. I couldn't do it anymore, contract-wise. So Snyder got it as well. He's like, you got to go do your thing. But yeah, so then those shows, it made sense. Everybody kind of landed in a show that made a lot of sense. Kenny did Jedi Council.
Jedi Alliance, sorry.
So many shows. Too many shows. Oh my God. When I was over working with that AfterBuzz, I would call Jedi Alliance Jedi Council. And then when I came over to Jedi Council, I called it Jedi Alliance, and everybody, looked at me like an idiot. That was really fun. Unfortunately, we couldn't sustain that because of, goes back to the pay. We weren't getting paid to do that. Right. So it launched us even further out into the space. You fast forward and everybody took up jobs either with Kenny over at Defy and Screen Junkies, Macuga's at Film HQ. We all landed, and a lot of that had to do with those shows at AfterBuzz. It was a great opportunity that Menounos and Undergaro gave us.
There was a bit of a hiatus until Phase 6, and I think it was a bit longer than anybody anticipated because there were deals to get closed. There was a lot of time needed to get things right. Mm-hmm. And from my perspective, it seemed like your status was up in the air for a while. You went over to Geek Nation, like you mentioned. Mm-hmm. You were doing some writing. You were doing some podcasting, like the Far, Far Away podcast. Was there a point where you began to doubt whether you'd be involved in Phase 6 of the Schmoes Know Show?
Yeah, there was some doubt. We were trying to create a deal for a show. It looked like we might be going to Defy with Screen Junkies. Then the Collider was on the table. Geek Nation was even on the table. And then it started to look like I might not be able to be a part of Schmoes anymore because of my contract with Geek Nation.
Right.
That started to bum me out like you wouldn't believe. I had conversations with Kristian. I'll pull back the veil just a little bit and tell you a little bit where Kristian was very understanding. He's like, I get it. You got to do what you got to do. But it was breaking my heart because I wanted to do the show, but it was a kind of a business thing. Then just on the outside and being friends with Kristian, because no matter what, the end of the day, Kristian's been one of my dear best friends since 2000, as you mentioned. I was never not going to see him, but I started to have conversations with him when we would just talk as friends and being like, well, what's the status of Schmoes? And I started to worry that they weren't going to find a home. And then I got word and wind of the Collider deal, and I was like, oh, good. I'm glad that at least the show is going to find a home. And then that position opened up at Collider, and that was the rest of his history. And once I got hired there, it was like, oh, I'm back on the show.
It's amazing how it all worked out. Everybody landed in the right place, like you said, and big credit to John Campea for being the liaison between Schmoes and Complex.
Yeah.
Obviously, the wait was worth it. The show merged with Collider. It's better than ever, especially with the Schmoedown becoming a real, living, breathing show.
Mm-hmm.
So take me through a typical day for you at Collider so people understand what the life of Reilly is like.
How long is this podcast?
Hey, it's whatever you want it to be.
I wake up every morning around 6:30. I start finalizing the show notes for Movie Talk. I'm usually doing emails, texts with either when I first started, John had just left. So I would be texting with whoever was the main host that day and finalizing the order of the movie Talk. And then I would write it. I send it out by anywhere between 8 a.m. and 8:30 so that our wonderful graphics guy, Ray, can take the stories and finalize the graphics that you see during the show. And so I get those out about 8 o'clock, 8:30. Then I get ready. I get on the road. I get to studio. We have our pre-production meeting where we go through the notes. Sometimes I'll lead the meeting. Sometimes the host will lead it. Go through everything. We especially work with whoever's hosting that day, either Ashley, Natasha, or Sinead. Fact check. Everybody make sure everything looks good. Then we go do the show. I also create all the YouTube descriptions and links. We do the show. I run the Twitter, or at least I tweet out the links and whatnot and kind of monitor. That's where the Swiss Army knife comes in. Then I'm kind of jumping around from Twitter to the live chat to YouTube to the show notes. Sometimes things change. Breaking news will happen. I'll write up something on the spot and I'll email it to the host to kind of cue the main host. We'll do the show, and then I'm off. Then I'm either doing Collider news segments, so I'll write up stories to give either to Natasha, Sinead, or Ashley. We go shoot those. All the while, I'm then building a big movie talk post to put on Collider.com. That's where I then work with the .com writers. So I draft up a post. I let them know it's there. They kind of look it over. I'm then uploading a video, making sure that that's all glitch-free, get that on the post that. Then all the while I'm collecting stories throughout the day, whatever is breaking, and I'm talking every minute to who's hosting the next day. And I'm going, well, this just broke. You want to talk about that? Yes or no? Great. Then depending on the day, then we're talking, if TV Talk comes in, I'm in on that pre-production meeting. They go shoot that. I do the same thing. I take all the notes that Macuga writes. I'll edit them. I'll put them on .com. I'll post that. Nightmares. Of course, I'm a part of that show, so I'm in on the show. I'll get the show notes from Clarke. I'll edit those, put them on the website as well, post that. Wednesday rolls around, same deal. Heroes. I meet with all those guys. They shoot the show. Sometimes I'm even on it, post that on .com. Same goes Jedi Council. I'm on there. Kristian will send me the notes. I'll edit those up, get them on .com. So I'm running around from show to show to show. All the while, though, the flagship, I'm the head writer of Movie Talk, so I'm always talking to the host on what we're doing. So by the end of the day, once I've posted everything, written everything, I then have a rough outline of all the stories that broke throughout the day, and I present them to the host. They pick an order. I send a rough outline out. This is usually right before I leave the office. I'll send a rough outline out and I'll say, okay, here's the rough. I'll gather all the links needed for trailers. I'll gather all the quotes needed for graphics, any images that we're talking about. I send them all out with a rough outline. And then I go home and pretty much crash because I'm so damn tired. And then I wake up at 6:30 the next morning to do it all over again.
And is that why you sometimes miss Schmoes, because you're so exhausted from the day at Collider that you just have to take a night to yourself?
You know what? To be honest, that's pretty much what I did Thursday. Yeah.
You've got a personal life, too.
I got a personal life. As my girlfriend will say, I work a lot, and I want to sometimes have my time with her, have my time for myself, because I'm also not stopping writing. I'm working on a screenplay as well, so I need time to do that. I also have my dog.
Yeah.
I know it's crazy to think, but there are sometimes my girlfriend has a life too, and we have to work out a schedule where either myself or her take care of Cal. So sometimes, I want my girlfriend to have fun, so I just won't go do the show. I'll come home, and that's sometimes when I catch up on work, because going back to Collider News, we're also doing some Collider original stuff, and which I can't really talk about that much, but I can plug the new Mr. Sinister video we just launched.
Love it.
And thank you. Yeah, that was some Perry and John Schnepp action, including Frank and Jonathan, our editors, who made that thing just so damn beautiful.
Just to button up movie talk, how do you know when you have a full show that is 45 to 50 minutes? Is it as simple as 6 items plus the regular segments?
That's pretty much it. We come up with our 6 topics. We're looking for a real a main topic, a sexy main topic, as I like to call it, something that will get people to be interested, because sometimes, you've seen it, sometimes news sucks. Sometimes we don't have anything. I've really enjoyed John coming back into the fold and taking and becoming the executive producer and the host of Movie Talk, because he plays with the format, and I love it. I love it when he plays with the format, because if we don't have news, we'll throw in what I really enjoyed. He threw in a fall movie preview that he did on Film HQ with Schnepp. Right. I thought it was perfect, because it was able to get some eyes on Film HQ and vice versa. And so I enjoyed having that, because at the end of the day, sometimes we don't have things to talk about. Sometimes we'll do all mailbag and Twitter, because 1, we want to interact with the fans, and 2, sometimes there's just not enough news to talk about. So it's really great seeing him come back and kind of play with that format, and me and him work closely on that outline. So yeah, we just pick 6 topics. We plug in the segment of the day through AMC where we want it, rewind, opening this week, box office predictions, what have you. John will pick mailbag. Sometimes I pick mailbag, sometimes Dennis, sometimes the guys. And then we're off and running. With
John back in the fold, have your movie talk responsibilities changed at all?
Not a lot, just a little bit. We changed up a little bit of the formatting behind the scenes that are really it was just a template that he created that I then perfected, and we use that. It's a little bit more clear internally. What I like about John is that we'll meet sometimes for an hour right before we head out at the end of the night, which I didn't really do with the host before. And that's just a sign of how serious John takes it. And that I admire, because it's a very collaborative process. What do you think? Do you think we should run with this first? What do you think about this? How should we title this? And that's what I love about Movie Talk, is that we come up with a show that we think the fans will like. We think that people will want to tune in for. He brings that energy to it that only somebody who created the show would bring. And so that's what I love.
You guys tried some interesting things this week as you extended the panel to the Big Four.
Mm-hmm.
While the host and Wendy moved to the Schmo set.
Yeah.
I think it went very well. So what's your take on the expanded panel? What went into that?
I love it. I love that extended panel. I think that's what I even noticed a lot of tweets coming in, through Collider Video that I also run. They love the dynamic of Mark, Kristian, Schnepp, and John.
Old school.
It's the old school. Yeah. And I love it too. And that just worked out a couple days. Scheduling can be a nightmare. So including the hosts, they all do a bunch of different things. So sometimes you'll get your 3-person panel. Sometimes if it works out, you'll get your 4-person panel. John called an audible the other day and said, well, I want Ellis on as well. And I called Ellis and said, can you do Movie Talk tomorrow? And he said, yeah. And there's your 4-person panel. And that was just John. There wasn't really any sexy headlines out for the day, but there were interesting discussions. And that's what I remember from the meeting I had with John. He's like, I love this conversation because it can open up A, B, C, D, E, F, G. So let's get Ellis in because I want his take on it. Let's get Kristian over here because I want his take on it. And I need Schnepp here because blah, blah, blah. So I loved watching that happen. And it was just a spur of the moment. Let's get a 4-person panel going.
On our show last week, we talked about whether mailbag emails were better served on the weekends when they can be answered in longer form. Obviously, these emails can be quite lengthy, which takes more time for the host to read. And because somebody put a great deal of time into their email, you also don't want to give them short shrift. At the same time, you guys have made it a point to optimize Movie Talk's length of late. So I like how you allotted more time for emails on Tuesday of last week. And while I'm not saying you guys listened to our feedback, we did say that condensing these emails might be in everyone's best interest. And sure enough, you guys seem to follow suit. So simply put, I like that you're playing around with the mailbag format.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I know what you're talking. I mean, like I said, I listen to you guys, so I listen to your thoughts on mailbag. Mailbag's an interesting beast because if you were to log into ColliderVideo at Gmail, you will see over 6,000 emails, probably more. There are a lot of emails that come in that are books.
Right.
And so anybody listening that wants a mailbag question, make it concise, do it as quick as possible. Don't write us a book because I tell you, I do it, John does it, Kristian does it, Mark does it, Dennis does it. We log in, we open an email. If we see a book in front of us, we move on. We're not even going to spend time to read it because we don't have the time. So the second thing is we need to find something that is a good conversation starter. Sometimes they can be long, but they'll have pertinent information that we want to hit. Sometimes I will edit to get to that question, but we try also not to edit because that's somebody is taking the time to write something. So it is sometimes really hard to find a mailbag question because they're A, so many, and B, can be long and you have to get through them to find a good nugget to discuss.
It's interesting how after all these years, no matter what show it is, be it Movie Talk, Schmoes Know, even my own podcast, we're always in search of the perfect show, the perfect format. Mm-hmm. And guys like John and Kristian will never be satisfied because you can always improve your show.
Yeah.
You never want to think you have the perfect show because that means you stop listening to those around you, including your audience, and that you're willing to let things become stale. So as a fan of Movie Talk, I really appreciate that you guys are not resting on your laurels.
Oh, well, thank you.
Before I forget, I want to give credit where it's due, and that's to Natasha. She hosted Movie Talk for the first time in a couple weeks.
Right.
We had speculated, based on John's Facebook Live, that she might not be a part of that equation anymore. But she returned on Thursday, and she even dished it back to Ellis with her deadpan question about El Pollo Loco. I had said previously that it may not be practical to have 3 hosts for 5 shows. I also remarked that because of the off-the-cuff nature of Movie Talk, that Natasha's pageantry background might be a hindrance because she's had to be perfect for so long, and it's hard to let go of that mindset. But I stand corrected, at least for this week.
Yeah, she was great. And with Natasha, I mean, I can speak on the fact that when she wasn't on for a while, she had other gigs that she had to do, and she couldn't actually be on. I know she was away at one point, and that she was also trying to fit in getting her Collider News segments in as well because she's become a fixture on that. I happen to like all 3 of them because they bring a different dynamic each time. And Natasha's just a sweetheart, and I can't wait to watch E.T. with her and do commentary.
Like I said earlier, sometimes we're not given all the information, so we run with the information that we do have. And John's Facebook Live seemed to indicate that he'd be rolling with 2 hosts from now on. So that's where the speculation started.
Yeah.
Now, since you're there so often, since you're at that studio all the time, how often are you able to watch Collider or Schmoes content in your off time?
0 time.
Yeah.
I do occasionally jump in and watch some content. I will help Perry with Best of the Week. So sometimes I will go back in to look at time codes. Sometimes I'll go back in and watch certain shows to get a little information on, I don't know, whatever you might need. But I wish I had the time to watch every show. I watch every show pretty much because I'm in studio. So even if I'm not on the panel, I'm in the room watching, and I'm taking notes. So that's where I already know what happens. So I don't need to watch anything.
Are you able to watch the shows you're on without critiquing yourself? Or do you go back and watch in order to critique yourself for next time?
I don't really watch anything I'm on, to be honest with you. I lived it, so I can critique myself. I know when I need to do better. I know when I need to be clearer and more concise in my speculation, discussions. I like to think I'm aware of it. I don't really look at comments on YouTube, especially because it's a hive of scum and villainy. I know it's a part of the game, but the internet can be just such a wild, wild west of things. And
it's the wild, wild web. Tip your waitress, folks.
I've seen people, colleagues, friends, get down in the dumps off of comments on YouTube. I mean, it really can just be an awful place sometimes. But I will look every once in a while because you kind of have to see what they're talking about. You get a little feedback on what you're doing right. You get a little feedback on what you're doing wrong. And you also get little hints that we've been having some issues with YouTube.
I noticed that.
We're trying to figure out what the hell is going on. And that's only coming from comments. Like, I'm here. This is loud here. Why is this glitchy here? Why is this jumping to the end of the show? Blah, 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 blah. So you're like, what is going on? I especially had a conversation with John and Kristian the other day where we're like putting our heads together going, why is this happening?
Shifting to nightmares and having watched you on a number of shows for many years, you seem really at home on this show. Would you credit the panel of people or your passion for the genre or both?
It's both. When that show was being developed, it was always Clarke and Perry. And, I was just being the good producer that I was, and I was just kind of hovering around. And then at one point I was talking to Perry, and she realized, Perry and I are very, very similar in our tastes, and we love pretty much the same horror movies. And she's like, she had this look about her, and she went, "You need to be on Nightmares." And I said, "Yeah, I do." And so I walked into Dennis's office, and I said, I want to be on Nightmares. And he went, oh, that's perfect. Yeah, so does Schnepp. And I go, oh, God, that's perfect. So then I ran it by Clarke, and she was all in because I had her as a guest on the Halloween episode of Meet the Movie Press. I just hit it off with her, and she agreed, and the rest is history.
And this is another way that you serve as the Swiss Army knife for the channel and website.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, you write for Movie Talk and you refine the notes for Collider.com, but you're also able to fill in on every show, be it Jedi Council, Heroes, Movie Talk.
Mm-hmm.
If this was baseball, you'd be the utility player.
Yeah.
But you mentioned the Collider original videos. Is that the term that you guys are giving those videos?
Yeah. It kind of started with the rap.
Yeah, from the Collider News Wrap to the Behind the Music follow-up to this week's Mr. Sinister, as well as the quick reviews from personalities like John Campea, which you guys expanded this week as Kristian did a quick Magnificent 7 review, while Perry and Josh did a quick Mr. Robot review.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems like you guys are creating videos that fit the strengths of each personality. Schnepp could probably do 1 million of these comic book topic-based videos that are quick and to the point. Kristian perhaps could do Star Wars-related videos where he debunks the theory of the week, so to speak. And I'm sure that a lot of these videos are budget and time permitting, but is it fair to say, moving forward, that you're going to put more emphasis on these short-form Collider original videos?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that. There is definitely conversations we're having where we're trying to expand the channel as much as we can. I'm bopping over to meet with Perry on a number of things, and Kristian as well, John as well. In fact, I had a very, very long conversation yesterday that I'll just tease as being awesome because I'm very, very excited for the direction that we're going. And you're going to see a lot in the upcoming months, it's very, very exciting.
You guys have some talented people both in front of the camera and behind the camera, whether it's actors, writers, comedians, etc. So I like that you are using your personalities in these short-form videos, such as the JTE 30 for 30 or the rap, and yet you're still tying things back to movies or the Schmoedown. I think there's more to gain from these type of videos than simply counting down your most anticipated films of the upcoming year. You can still do that, but why not use the wonderful personalities that you have on staff to entertain in the process?
Yeah, well, and that's very, kind of to go off your comment, it's a very big conversation that we don't just want to put out videos and provide content, because I do believe, and I think I won't speak for people, but I've heard people who I work with say this, too much content is a bad thing, in my opinion. I think you can oversaturate your own channel. You have subscribers, and if your subscriber email folder is just over and over and over again with videos, it can be a turnoff. So you want to make sure you put out the best product you can without putting out just product. Does that make sense?
Definitely. Like I said, the Collider News videos were related to what you guys talk about, so there was a purpose. Mm-hmm. Sinead's bit about spelling people's names like they're pronounced was hilarious.
Right.
However, I do hope that the sequel spells out Giacchino like it's pronounced. But the Schmoedown especially is so ripe with opportunity, and I'm sure Kristian has had this idea already, but I would love to see a teaser campaign for new competitors that build some hype around their character's debut. Mm-hmm. I haven't been a fan of wrestling since the late 90s, but there were wrestlers like Edge and Chris Jericho that had fans long before their debuts, all because of how effective their teaser campaigns were.
Yeah, the Schmoedown is just so much fun, and I'm excited for the direction it's taking. It's getting bigger. There's already conversations. We want to expand it. I think the best thing in the world is seeing that belt up for grabs and have different competitors beat a favorite to move on to the next round. It's an exciting thing. Yeah. I lost the belt to Merle, and, you know, it stung a little bit, but I was happy to see it move to an interesting place and to see other people come up in the ranks to take it. I tell you, I loved seeing more and more people have their favorite come in, whether it be the outlaw John Roca or Kristian making a run or Mark Ellis. Mark Ellis's huge win over Levine, that was awesome. Look out for Mark Ellis, man. I'm impressed with him.
Macuga as well. He had the big win yesterday over Clarke Wolfe. So
look at Macuga.
Everybody keeps counting him out, myself included, and he's proven everybody wrong.
Yep, he will. He'll do that. He took me to the finals, and it came down to the last question. Yeah. So you never count him out, and that's what I love about it. You know, you got Macuga in there, you got me in there, you got Ellis in there, and you got the outlaw in there. Every single one of those guys can move on and take on Dan Murrell. Maybe not Macuga, though. I don't know if his luck will last that long.
And who knows? You may have the belt back already. Just a podcast joke. Forgive me.
Oh, yeah, I know it. I know the joke. And I don't. I will say that. I do not. And, yeah, it's actually... It's not what you think.
Well, shifting to Film HQ on the ColliderVideos feed, I just want to make a quick comment about this. I like it. I like that we're getting a feel for what John has been doing with Film HQ. Complex obviously has invested a lot of their resources into the development of Comic-Con HQ, as well as the program Film HQ, as well as ColliderVideos. So I'm surprised it did not happen sooner, where we got kind of a trial run of Film HQ. And I think some people mistakenly believe that this was going to be a permanent inclusion on the channel, when in actuality it's just for a few episodes.
Yeah. I don't have my hands in that too much, so all I know is that it did appear on the channel a little bit. It's a business too. Complex is running both, so they're trying to get it out there.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with cross-promotion, and I've only seen one other episode that they did, the Civil War episode, and having seen that episode versus this one, I think the show has improved greatly, so I don't have any issues with the decision to cross-promote, especially when you think about Complex's perspective. So let's shift to the Schmoedown.
Okay.
Freddie Prinze Jr. versus Sam Witwer. Tell me about your reaction to this match. Were you there, first off?
I was there, yeah. And man, it was fun. Those guys are great. I've been on a podcast with Witwer before. He knows some of the peeps at Geek Nation, so I got to see him a couple times. Met Freddie through, obviously, this, and that was just an awesome match. I mean, what a great way to promote Rebels and also see those guys come in and have fun. Being in the room that day was just awesome.
Did they write their own intros, or did you help with that? Did Kristian help with that? Who kind of came up with the kernels of the idea?
I think that was a combination of Kristian and them. You know, Kristian's the master promoter. You know, right. He is cut from the cloth of the WWE. So, and then add Star Wars in there, and you got that entrance.
Yeah, lately I've been calling him Christian Bischoff, which I'm not sure he actually appreciates. Last week I talked about how the Schmoedown's entertainment value comes from good competition the majority of the time. Of course, that was in response to a point that Macuga made. However, while this match was pretty much in Witwer's control, it was still incredibly entertaining, even though it wasn't that close of a match. So
Right.
I'm not walking back my comments from last week completely, but in this case, it was a very entertaining match, regardless of the competitiveness. And that's just a credit to Freddie's charisma, as well as his rapport with Sam.
Yeah.
Witwer's Sarah Michelle Gellar joke just killed me. Needless to say, I was surprised, like everybody else, that Freddie got the Star Killer base question wrong.
Yeah.
And not because The Force Awakens just came out, but because Freddie is such a bottomless pit of information,
right,
especially Star Wars. So I'd bet anything that Freddie already knew that Luke's original last name, before Lucas changed it, was Starkiller. So I'm surprised that bit of trivia did not trigger this answer in him, since he likely connected the dots when he first heard the Starkiller base being referenced in The Force Awakens. But Witwer's turn to the dark side in the post-match interview was amazing.
It was so awesome.
I mean, that guy can turn it on in a second.
Yep.
However, it seemed like Sam challenged Macuga by mistake, because there's been talk for a while that Campea and Ken would be the ones to take on Freddie and Sam in a tag team match.
Yeah.
But Witwer kind of challenged Macuga for a second until Kristian stepped in.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think it was a mistake on Sam's part, or do you think it was planned for Kristian to come in and take over?
I don't know. I think Witwer is just having fun.
I was looking for the sexy headline, Mark.
I just think he literally was doing, you said, the heel turn. And I think he just Macuga was at the wrong place at the wrong time. There might have been something between Kristian and Witwer where they planned that. I actually wasn't there for it. So, but I do know that Witwer is just somebody that he's really funny. And I think he targeted Macuga, and it was awesome.
He had the great line, "I don't like your tones." That was fantastic.
It was fantastic.
Let's move to Clarke and Macuga.
Okay.
Now, last week we predicted on this show that Macuga would win because Kristian, during episode 250 of Schmoes Know Show, kind of got flustered when he was trying to think of who Macuga was going to play next. Mm-hmm. He kind of had to stop and think about it. And that implied to Snelling and I that he had indeed advanced, and Kristian had to think about where he was at that point in the tournament. So like I said, we predicted Macuga would win. He did. It was a very close match. What was your reaction to this? So
we shot it yesterday, so there was no way Kristian could have predicted that. What you saw is the inner workings of now a Schmoedown that have a lot of moving parts.
Yes, lots of moving parts.
There are so many matches in the pipeline that you have to figure out, well, we're shooting this tomorrow. Okay, we're shooting this next Thursday. And then after that, we have blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah going head to head. So we need to do this. So it's going to run together. And yeah, I think you just saw Kristian trying to work out the schedule in his head and not revealing a winner.
Of course.
We didn't even shoot it yet. So I went in convinced Clarke Wolfe was going to just destroy Macuga. I was very wrong.
And I think those expectations have kind of gotten to Clarke. Everybody's picking her, and she knows that everybody's picking her. And I think that's kind of gotten to her, it seems. She's kind of cracking under the weight of expectations.
Yeah, well, it's something I can speak on it, because after that match, I started getting tweets saying I'm their only hope. And I'm like, for what? It's a movie trivia show. Calm down. It can be very, very, very overwhelming sometimes, the reactions you get and how much people want you to win. And you either take it in stride, or you laugh it off, or you take it seriously. And I've done all of those. I've taken it way too seriously. I've laughed it off. I've been bummed to lose. And I'm going to go in and just have fun, because that's the only thing you can do. Because when you are in the ring and doing the Schmoedown, I got to tell you, it happens to every competitor. The lights, the pressure, you can actually forget things. I've had things in my head during the Dewberry match, Merle's match, every match where on any given day I can answer that thing in my sleep, and then all of a sudden I'm there under the lights and I'm like, where'd the answer go? And it just happens, and it sucks when it happens. And I think that's happening with Clarke a little bit sometimes.
Do you personally prefer an audience, or would you prefer the room to be empty during your matches?
It doesn't matter to me. I've done it with a big audience, and I've done it where it's just the crew. And it doesn't matter to me. Either way, it's like, audience or not, when you're in and doing the match, it can be nerve-wracking.
Do you believe Macuga when he says he was guessing on the Schindler's List quote? Or do you think he was playing it up for the moment?
No, that was a guess.
He is so good at the educated guess.
That's exactly what it was. And I think he probably went, list, what's a movie? And the reason it took a little bit for him to answer is list. What's a movie with a Schindler's List?
The Good Morning Vietnam steal was huge. Mm-hmm. And getting to the final round, Clarke having to name all 5 Guardians from Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah.
That's tough. I mean, Macuga had to name 2 out of the 5 Star Trek films with a certain composer.
That was tough, yeah.
But essentially, this question boils down to, do you remember Zoe Saldana's character's name, Gamora? And a few months ago, I gotta say, even though I've seen the film 5 times, I could not remember the character's name to save my life. So I wasn't surprised that this was the one character that Clarke could not remember.
Yeah. See, that's the thing about the Schmoedown, too. That wheel is your best friend or your worst enemy, and the way the questions land, you never know what you're going to get. Category 1, Category 2, the numbers you pick at the end. There are questions that have come out where, I'm sorry, like Roca getting his last question, Mrs. Doubtfire, is one of the easiest questions I've ever seen. Yeah. For Clarke to have to name all of the Guardians, that's tough. There are questions that come out where you're just like, what? I don't believe it. And then there are questions that come out that are just a cakewalk. And that's why you're going to see a lot of people going after the belt, because you can get a run of questions. The perfect example is my match with JTE. I got every question that was perfect for me, and he got every question that was just the worst for him. It'll happen for JTE where he'll get a run of really great questions. He's due. And that's what the Schmoedown is.
Besides being the master of the educated guess, Macuga is the white rose of the Schmoedown because he's the time master. He continues to use every available second while getting extra help through questions being repeated and talking through his own thought process.
Yeah, it's a good strategy.
I'm surprised more competitors don't utilize this strategy since people seem to be aware that he's doing it. When he asked a question to be repeated, I could have sworn that I heard RB3 crack up at the fact that he was, of course, stalling for time. If you have the time, take it. Use it.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
It's a great way to combat the time that your nervous energy takes away from you.
Mm-hmm.
John kind of capped it off nicely after Macuga's win. I simply don't know what's real anymore. So great line there.
Yeah, it was great.
Well, moving to the live show, episode number 251 of the Schmoes Know Show. I know you weren't there, but I want to get your comments about a couple events that went down on this show.
Okay.
We saw the return of Katee Sackhoff, the woman who helped put the show on the map in Phase 3, while we saw the exit of the show's matriarch, Miri the Jedi. Mark, tell me about your first reaction to the news that Miri was leaving.
I mean, I was bummed. She's a great producer, but at the same point, I got it. She has a lot of opportunities in front of her that require her attention. I know a lot of people are bummed about it, but it's just like, it's a big space, but it's also a very small space. Everybody knows everybody, and there's always that she's going to be coming back and being on the show. I mean, it's as simple as that. It was kind of like, oh, she's leaving? Oh, that sucks, but okay, move on.
On my first episode of the Schmoeville podcast, I kind of called this because she had just taken the HitFix gig, and Kristian tried his hardest to kind of keep me off the trail, but it seemed inevitable because I knew that she had a family and a husband and all these other things going for her that you just can't juggle that many things at one time. So I love that you guys had fun with the teaser videos, and when I saw yours, I certainly didn't want you to leave the show, but I couldn't help but think, what if you agreed to do the Schmoeville podcast as kind of a goodbye to the fans, a goodbye to Schmoeville?
Right? That was funny. I had no idea. I thought people would see right through that because I walked into the studio and Tiffany is taping her response, and I came in at the tail end where she's setting up the, I ain't going anywhere, bitches. And I'm like, oh, I see what they're doing. Yeah. I see what Kristian's doing. this is obviously has Kristian's hands all over it. And she finishes her thing, and I look at Kristian, I go, hey, I should do one because I'm not on the show tonight. And he went, yeah. And it was so last minute. I thought maybe 2 minutes of it, did my thing, walked out, went home. My phone blew up all of a sudden. And I went, what the hell is going on? And people were, I was surprised and very touched to see that people were, one, scared that I was actually leaving. And then I got a few like, don't, F with me like that, Reilly, you son of a bitch. And I was like, oh, that's funny. But I thought people would just be like, oh yeah, here we go. The Schmoes are just screwing with us because, let's be honest, we're going to screw with you if we can.
You guys love shtick. I mean, that's what makes the show so entertaining.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was fun. But yeah, I mean, I thought people would put 2 and 2 together. I work at Collider. I'm not going anywhere unless I actually leave Collider, which is not happening at all.
So what's the one thing you'll think of when you think back on the Miri Jedeikin era of the show as executive producer?
Miri was a very quiet producer in that it was very planned, organized. She's just a very good producer. So the fact that I can't really name a particular moment is just a sign of how good she is, because you don't even notice until she's gone. I really liked the Q&A when she ran the Q&A.
Yeah.
Miri is that mom.
Exactly.
She is a mom. And so you feel very comfortable just being like her running the Q&A where you're going to be taken care of with a question coming your way because she's kind of the filter. So that's probably my favorite moment.
Since Katee is the queen of Schmoeville, I truly think that Miri will be regarded as the matriarch of Schmoeville. Everybody felt like they were in good hands, whether you're a fan or a Schmo. I remember when Kristian got the pit boss a job at Screen Junkies and he had to leave his role as producer, there was a bit of a panic that the show wouldn't survive without him or wouldn't be the same without him. And yet Miri came right in and the show didn't miss a beat.
Yeah.
So credit to her.
Yeah, and it's going to continue to do that with Copster being a main producer because Copster is good at what he does. Yeah. Even though we can poke fun at him a lot. He's a guy that, if you go way back to Meet the Schmoes videos with Finstock, I don't know if you saw this, Finstock breaks into my apartment.
Yeah.
That was my first time meeting Copster. And quite legitimately, I looked at him while we were filming that and I go, who the fuck are you? And ever since, I've just taken a liking to Copster. He's one of my favorite people in the world and one of my best friends, and he's good at what he does. So we're gonna keep moving.
Once again, you guys certainly don't need my help, but more of those videos, not just Schmoes, but Collider, where we see you guys from a different point of view, I think will really enhance the overall experience. And that's kind of why we do this podcast, because we have our own point of view and fans can compare their point of view to ours while you guys can hear the point of view of the fans.
Keep your eyes open because I think you're going to see more of that kind of stuff. I mean, not necessarily in the Meet the Schmoes kind of stuff, but we have a great canvas to paint on with a lot of different colors and a lot of different personalities. It's so much fun to think about that we actually have the opportunity to do this. It's such a dream come true, actually. There are moments that I'm sitting in studio with all these people and I'm like, a corporation is actually paying me a salary to go play with my friends. It's ridiculous. I don't know how I got so lucky. Well, I do. I worked hard, but it's great.
Again, when you think back to that day at CPK, waiting tables with Kristian, it's amazing to think where it all led.
I can't believe it. I do. I look back at we're waiting tables and sucking our will to live, and we'll just go out and drink that night and hoping to God that we all land somewhere that we love doing what we do, because that's the thing. That's the rub in the film business. I never thought I would be on this side of it. I always imagined I would be writing and producing, which I'm doing now, but in a different way. But then again, there wasn't this YouTube space. There wasn't this online opportunity, and the Schmoes are at the forefront of that. There's a reason why they captured the lightning in a bottle like they did. They started to do the film reviews on YouTube before it was a thing. Now there's just so many. I don't know how people can keep doing it, and it just seems daunting to me. And I'm on the inside looking out sometimes. So I always give credit where credit's due. I think of the Jeremy Johns and the Chris Stuckmans and the Schmoes, the different people in the space. You know, they cut out a path for them. I would always go to ain'titcoolnews.com. That was my, you know, scoops and movie discussions and all that kind of news that I enjoyed. And then to think that it's now moved even bigger, and video is such a big portion of it, and speculation and discussion is such a big part of it. There is an ESPN Sports Center quality to it that I love, and I just can't believe that it's a thing.
Mark, as we wind down, what is the status of the Schmoes Know website?
The website, you know, I had to leave it because of Geek Nation, and then when I came back in the fold at Collider, I shared an office with Mark and Kristian, and we started to talk about it. I can't remember how the idea came around to just make it as an extension of Schmoeville. I kind of ran with it and contacted my old crew of Aaron and Rachel and Chris, added Corey to it, and they are the ones that are running that thing right now. And it came to be a place of let's open it up to, I mean, I'm surprised every day by the talent inside Schmoeville, be it artwork, memes, writing. Just in talking with Kristian and Mark, it was like, well, that makes a lot of sense. If we the website's there, you know, we're not looking at it as something that is going to blow up and be maybe a full-service news website like a Collider.com. I implore people to go look at these editorials and these opinion pieces that they do. For instance, like one of the articles we have right now is sometimes Hollywood gets a movie remake right. And that's a great piece. It was then my suggestion that maybe get some more eyes on the website, because unfortunately we lost a lot of viewers or visitors to the site once I left for Geek Nation, and the site kind of went dark, if you will, for a while. So we don't have that base anymore because it was full service news and people could rely on it. And unfortunately, we let them down with having to go do other things. So that news stopped. The visitors stopped. But now we're back. I only look it over. I mean, it really is Aaron and Chris and Rachel and Corey and the Schmoeville. And they are just kicking ass. I'm just a conduit to that. I just look it over. If they need me, I answer when I can. But yeah, you kind of said it. I am way too busy to run it full time. So I've given the keys to the castle to those guys, and they're doing a bang up job, not only with their, you know, their editorials, but now we're covering news again. We're covering big news stories. So you can get the major news stories by visiting schmoesknow.com, and it's great. I love seeing it.
I was on there today, and there's definitely some great stuff going on. So folks, make sure to check out schmoesknow.com. Mark, last question. You mentioned you are working on a screenplay in your spare time. Is this Schmoes related, or is this a personal project?
No, this is a personal project. It's very, very hard for me to actually find some time to write, but I am currently outlining it. I've got about 10 pages written. It is something, it's an idea I've had for probably going on 10 years that I'm finally putting to paper. The great thing about my job is that I know a lot of different people, so it's stupid not to take advantage of the fact that I have a decent following. I know a good number of people. My goal has always been to be a screenwriter working in Hollywood, and I can do both. So I think even if I were to sell a screenplay, make a movie happen, I wouldn't necessarily have to go anywhere. I would still work with Collider and the Schmoes. So I'm hoping that that's something that can bear fruit.
Do you want to give us a genre teaser or a log line perhaps, or do you want to keep it close to the vest?
I got to keep it close to the vest. I will say that it's comedy. There's a romantic nature to it. There is a high concept to it. I wish I could say more. Yeah, I'm going to keep it close to the vest because I can't tell you, Brian, how many times I've had an idea and I have this weird superstition. I used to tell everybody what I'm working on. Oh, yeah, it's about this. And I would give them the log line. I would give them the beats. I'd give them the act structure. I'd give them the full concept. And then like a week later, I'd read in the trades that a similar idea is in the works. I mean, that has happened so many times. So I started to get very superstitious. So I started keeping everything close to the vest. So that's what I'm doing here as well. Once it's ready, I will then talk about it because I'll have it available to put out there. Meantime, I'm also trying to, sooner or later, which I will tell, I want to write my Gremlins prequel as a script and get it to the powers that be, because There is a Gremlins movie waiting to happen, and they're trying to make a Gremlins 3, and they're going to get it wrong unless I have something to say about it. I want to set up a Gremlins prequel that takes place in World War II with the Gremlins being a metaphor for the Red Scare that happens, and it takes place in a small town where we meet Gizmo for the very first time in the 1950s.
I'm all in.
Yeah, that's what I want. So I'll get that out there sooner or later.
Well, Mark, where can people find more of you and your work?
You can always find me on Twitter, @ReillyAround. Go to ColliderVideos on YouTube. You can see me there all over the place. My Swiss Army knife will appear on many of those shows. So go there. Keep an eye out on the Collider Originals, Collider.com, and of course, Schmoes Know and Schmoesknow.com.
Do you have any parting words for Schmoeville?
What a great community. So I always got to thank Schmoeville for being just so damn nice to me, and I can't believe people actually care about what I have to say. So you make me happy, so thank you.
Mark, thanks again for coming on, and we'll talk again at some point.
My pleasure, Brian. Thanks.
Well, folks, make sure to stick around. The show is not done quite yet. I've got a few final thoughts on episode 251 of the Schmoes Know Show, the week that was in Collider, as well as Josh Macuga.
Special thanks to our friends at Loot Crate. You get a new box of really cool stuff every month when you subscribe to their service. It's September, and September is all about speed. Katie, lace up your sneakers, rev your engines, feel the adrenaline of some of pop culture's quickest vehicles and characters. They got a high-octane assortment of goodies from Batman, CW's The Flash and Arrow, Battlestar Galactica, heard of it? Iron Man, gone in 60 seconds. You get your 2 collectibles, a figure, some neat surprises, and as always, the monthly t-shirt and pin. Check out Loot Crate right now. You can go to the link in our vid's description for more on how to subscribe. Get a new box of really fun stuff every month.
Well, Schmoeville, it's been a bittersweet week. We had 2 memorable Schmoedown matches, while the Collider content was as reliable as ever. We saw the return of the Queen, Katee Sackhoff, but the exit of the matriarch, Miri Jedeikin. I wish I had trusted my first instinct about this, because I smelled trouble as of my debut on Schmoeville number 20. And I've been watching this space long enough to know that a new job is typically the writing on the wall. I'm still perplexed by the SPR experience and how she's all but disappeared since the See in France interview without any explanation. She's been on other shows during this time, so I don't want to hear stuff about her cat or root canals, etc. They even hired Perry, so was this all part of the plan to cover up Miri's exit? If so, that is some next level deceit by Kristian Harloff. I wrote a Katee Sackhoff history lesson, but after the Reilly interview, I realized that we already touched on the majority of those big moments, as did the live show. I wrote a bit that I kinda liked about the first time Kristian and Katee met, and I zeroed in on the fact that Harloff and Sackhoff both end in off. There was a little Martha moment, as well as something else that I'll leave to your imagination. And now I want to address the issue that got us a lot of attention this week, both on the live show and through social media.
We got a little bit of drama happening right now. Schmoeville, if you guys aren't listening again on the podcast channel, I tell you that Brian Davids, who I like a lot, him and Ryan Snelling, the 2 of them are really good. They have very good banter. Man, this Brian kid takes shots at Macuga.
Well, look, that's the fun thing about having an after show, that while we endorse it, we're a fan of it, it's not like we're controlling it and telling them what to say. So everything that happened to us or about the show in the week that was, they recap it, but they give their own opinion on it, and sometimes he's very bold.
He's been shitting on Macuga left and right.
Really?
Oh, he's been just calling. I mean, I'm saying he's a glutton for. He's just trying to always get attention. And
as you can hear, we got some heat for our Josh Macuga comments last week, me especially, and while I normally wouldn't address this, I think it's necessary in this case. Sometimes on this show, there's going to be a little bit of shtick. To keep you guys coming back to this show, we have to entertain you. We can only complain about the length of Movie Talk emails for so long. But please understand something. I like Josh Macuga. I've been a fan of Schmoes Know for a very long time, and you can't be a fan of Schmoes without being a fan of Josh Macuga's. And while I've said this many times, my favorite Collider show right now is TV Talk, which is hosted by none other than Josh Macuga. So if I'm ever critical of Josh Macuga, please understand a couple things. Number 1, it's shtick. And number 2, I'm critiquing Josh's wild man persona. To me, Josh Macuga is the guy who hosts TV Talk and does the news on Film HQ. The Wild Man is the guy who twerks, flexes, strips, and prevents Natasha or Sinead from bringing out the wheel during Schmoedowns. On my second show, episode 21, I delivered a genuine rant against Josh's takedown of Humberto Gonzalez, and it also got some attention on the live show. The purpose of that rant was to defend Humberto and Kristian, but since then, I decided to create this one-sided rivalry with Macuga as show-related shtick. The problem with shtick is that not everybody gets it. Some people do, but that doesn't guarantee its effectiveness either. So believe me when I say that there is no ill will for Josh. He knows this, and I'd love for him to shtick it to us on this very show someday. My one regret is that I didn't notify Josh in advance that we would be doing some wild man shtick on the show, and for that I've apologized to him. But as a general rule of thumb, and this goes for everyone, there's a line that I'll dance in front of, but I'll never cross it. You won't find me petitioning against someone's employment or anything like that. So Josh, we were meant to be allies. Plus we're 2 of the 73 people who watch *Halt and Catch Fire*. And lastly, to Schmoeville, we do this show because we love the network, we love the shows, and we love the personalities. If we're ever critical, it comes from a good place. Our feedback will almost always be constructive. Yodi explained how their emails and YouTube comments are overwhelming. So the fact that we can relay our thoughts about what we liked, what we didn't like, while knowing that they're listening is something we don't take for granted. So just understand, at the end of the day, we're trying to inform you first and entertain second. So I hope that clears things up moving forward, as once in a while, we're going to try to be funny, and oftentimes, we're going to fall flat on our faces, me especially. So to avoid ending the show on a complete downer, I want to close with our segment, Conspiracy Corner. By now, you've probably heard that a certain YouTube channel is creating a second channel for movie news. Well, guess who pulled out of the Ultimate Schmoedown tournament not too long ago? The head of those 2 channels. Did that person's guilt and shame get the best of them? So much so that they could not honor their commitment to the Ultimate Schmoedown? Could they not face their loyal friends at ColliderVideos and Schmoes Know? Time will tell. Time will tell. In closing, I want to thank our sponsor, John Campia's Citrus Slice, as well as our guest, Mark Reilly. Many thanks to RB3 and Cody Hall for uploading this episode. I also want to thank my co-host, Ryan Snelling, who provided everything I needed before he retreated to his remote cabin. You guys can follow him on Twitter at What'sUpSnell. In the meantime, you can follow me, Brian Davids, on Twitter at BDF331. Check out my TV film podcast, Film Schlubs, wherever podcasts are found, or at filmschlubspodcast.com. There I talk TV, movies, and conduct interviews with people like Better Call Saul's Ray Seahorn. If you're listening to this in YouTube, make sure to like this video and leave a comment. If you're listening to us in iTunes or through the podcast app, make sure to leave a review in iTunes and help support the Schmoes Know feed in the rankings. Well, Schmoeville, until next time, I'm Brian Davids, and the issue is, I have a ponytail.